Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas Tasya Radhanamihate Labhate Chastata Kaman Mayeva Vihitan Hitan. Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires, but in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. So here, in this section of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about developing faith and how a person who has material desires, according to the nature of the desires that he has, he approaches a particular personality and puts his faith in them, expecting a particular result that they desire. This is a very interesting thing because today in the modern world, faith and science are considered as two completely different things. Srila Prabhupada would explain that this is a misconception. Why? If you go to chapter 17, text number 3, Sattvanurupa sarvasya shraddha bhavati bharata shraddhamayoyam purusha yoyat shraddasa eva saha. O son of Bharata, according to one's existence under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. A living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the modes he has acquired. Purport: everyone has a particular type of faith regardless of what he is. But his faith is considered good, passionate, or ignorant according to the nature he has acquired. Thus, according to his particular type of faith, one associates with certain persons. So, there's more, of course, over there. But the main point is that here Krishna says in this verse, Shraddhamayoyam Purusha, that Purusha, the living entity, is Shraddhamayoyam. He is filled with faith. In fact, without faith, one cannot execute or do anything in life. You have to have, Srila Prabhupada explained this. It's like people who are proud of being scientific, they say, I don't have faith in, I don't believe in things like faith. Or, faith is for those who are unscientific. But actually, you need faith to do anything. You need faith to board a bus. You need faith if you open a book, you should have some faith that you're going to understand something from this book. Otherwise, what's the point in reading it? You don't know anything in the book. You don't know anything about the book. You don't know what's in the book, but you have some faith. And therefore, actually, life is executed with some faith. And this is a very, very important point to understand, because this is what Krishna is speaking about over here. He says that people have a certain type of faith. Now, what determines the type of faith that they have? What determines the type of faith that one has? It depends on one's desires. Depending on one's desires, one develops faith accordingly. Because to obtain the fulfillment of one's desires, one needs to have some faith. Otherwise, you cannot fulfill your desires. Now, in the animalistic form of life, this is called as instinct. You just have instinct, and you go along with that instinct. You might have seen videos of a herd of deer crossing a river in Africa. And the river is filled with treacherous crocodiles. And it's a standard thing. They start to charge into the river, and immediately all these crocodiles, they come approaching them, and they obviously find some deer and catch and kill it. What makes the other deer cross? It's instinct, but it's instinct born out of desire, which is called faith. Because the living entity is full of faith. It's not, even animals have faith. This is the point. Because Krishna is Shraddhamayoyam Purusha. That the living entity is endowed with faith. But that faith depends on one's desires. And the deer has desire to go on to the other side of the river because for whatever reason the pasture land over there is what it desires to have. It desires to eat that pasture land. And then immediately it develops faith in crossing that river. Otherwise, say, if the desire is not there, why will you cross that river? You will not cross that river because it's full of treacherous crocodiles. But why do they do it? Because of desire. And in this way, you can analyze different living entities and you can see how this role of faith plays such an important, it's integral to life in itself. And this is why the Bhagavad Gita is called a theistic science. Srila Prabhupada actually says this in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. You can go to 1.1. Yeah, go to the purport. Bhagavad Gita is the widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya, glorification of the Gita. There it says one should read Bhagavad Gita very scrutinizingly with the help of a person who is a devotee of Sri Krishna and try to understand it without personally motivated interpretations. The example of clear understanding is there in the Bhagavad Gita itself. In the way the teaching is understood by Arjuna, who heard the Gita directly from the Lord. If someone is fortunate enough to understand the Bhagavad Gita in that line of disciplic succession without motivated interpretation, then he surpasses all studies of Vedic wisdom and all scriptures of the world. One will find in the Bhagavad Gita all that is contained in other scriptures, but the reader will also find things which are not found to be found elsewhere. That is the specific standard of the Gita. It is the perfect theistic science because it is directly spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, Lord Sri Krishna. So, now what we spoke about faith, this has nothing to do with what is colloquially called as faith. I'm talking about deer in Africa. It doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or whatever. We are discussing about a particular characteristic of certain living entities, and therefore, and this is, we are discussing this on the basis of the knowledge that is being spoken in the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, it is called science. But why is it theistic science? Because it's theistic science because, of course, there is acceptance and establishment of an entity known as God or the Supreme Person from whom everything has originated. So therefore it is a theistic science. But that word theistic science is an interesting word. It was coined by Srila Prabhupada because theism is not equated with science. Theism is called theology. You have theology and you have science. Means theology is your philosophy. And faith can do a lot because why can faith do a lot? I was just watching a little movie about the history of the Mormons and how the Mormons they migrated from the east to the Wild West in the and settled in the present state of Utah. And they built that state. I mean, literally, they built it ground up. And what's amazing is that the Mormons they went to the Wild West where there was nothing, there were no laws, there was nothing there. In fact, it was actually a desert. And being very industrious as a community, endowed with a particular type of faith, they built the place up like anything. I mean, they were extremely efficient as a community. They spread really fast. They were very, very organized. They were very united. And in many ways, they actually rooted out poverty in the community. There was no poverty because the sense of community was so strong that people actually lived prosperous lives to the extent that they could be prosperous. Now, of course, the United States government wasn't very happy with the Mormons because, they were kind of a bit rebellious and they wanted to separate and establish their own country, whatever. But it's very interesting because the United States government didn't want to completely, destroy the Mormons because they liked their industrious nature. They were like, they're doing what we want to do. We want to go and build that Wild West, and they're building it. So how can we utilize their industrious nature but rob them of the faith? Or whatever, at least not have it that much to the extent that they follow it. The reason I'm giving this example is because in history, in the annals of history, you can see what faith can do. And actually faith can do what is otherwise hard to achieve. Faith can achieve a lot in a short amount of time, can help people overcome otherwise quite insurmountable natures, make them cooperate in ways that they otherwise would have never cooperated because they have faith in a particular thing, in a particular concept, which unifies them over all their other differences, because people have differences. Why do people have differences? Because people are individuals. And for individuals to get together, there has to be something common. And that commonality is what has to generally be on the nature of faith, even if it's based, in the modern world, people unite over things like democracy. But the idea that democracy is better than other forms of government is a type of faith. It's nothing but faith. Because there are other systems of government that have existed in the past, and are very prosperous, nations, countries, kingdoms, where people lived quite happily, and at that point of time, those people did not want a change in the form of the government. They were very happy in that form of governance. So, why am I saying faith? Because it takes faith to say that democracy is the best form of governance. Because you can't prove that. You can't prove that logically. And that requires faith. Now, of course, faith in democracy has nothing to do necessarily with God. I mean, you can have a form of theistic democracy, but in itself, the idea of democracy has nothing to do with religion or God. But to work towards democracy, you have to have faith that it's actually better. You have to have faith. You have to have faith in all of these new ideas that people took to. For instance, communism. There is some logic that, this sounds good, but more than logic, it requires faith that, this sounds like it's going to work. This sounds like it's going to work, and this is how people unify. And why do they differ? Why do people differ on things? Because actually, although it might feel a difference of ideas, it's actually a difference of faith. It's a difference of faith on different things. Today's world, there's a concept of multiple genders. This also requires faith that this actually exists, because biologically you can't really prove it. It requires faith, and there are people who believe that because of faith these things exist. And then they unify for that purpose and differ with those who collide with that. But the important point, and this is what we are reading in today's verse, you can go back to today's verse, 7:22, is that a person is endowed with a certain type of faith because he has a particular kind of desire. And based on that kind of desire, he develops either a theistic or an atheistic attitude towards life, or something in between. And he obtains some benefits. There are some benefits. There are benefits to some form of faith over another type of faith. There's always something there, which is why people feel it's valuable. Whether that be democracy, for instance, an autocratic government it tends to be a very efficient type of government. It's a very efficient kind of government. There's not much infighting because there's a very strong person, an autocrat at the leadership. And things execute very quickly. Things are executed very quickly. You're either in line or you're out of line. And when the government wants things done, it can get done very quickly. Now, what kind of things are done is a whole other story. But the point is, there is something there that you don't find in some other kinds of systems of governance. And, okay, so democracy has something over something else. I'm mentioning these things because people have particular kinds of desires, and they give importance to those kinds of desires, and because of that, they develop a certain type of faith. And who makes that faith steady? It's the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. It's Krishna himself. This is what we see. Now, if one is a follower of the Vedas, then there are different kinds of demigods, and one can worship those different kinds of demigods to fulfill different kinds of desires. Or if you're out of the Vedic system, then depending on what kind of religion you followed, people had certain kinds of faith. I mean, you can't think that there was nothing there for the Greeks or Romans to have worshipped so many gods for so many years. I mean, generations. Something was there. What was that benefit? Ultimately, Srila Prabhupada makes a very nice point in the verse Vyavasaya Atmika Buddhi. Anybody remembers the number for that? 241? Srila Prabhupada gives a definition for faith. So if you go down, not too much. Yeah. Faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. It's a definition of faith. It's amazing how you can pick these things out of Srila Prabhupada's purports. These books are so amazing, so fantastic. That you can extract these gems, these great diamonds that you can find in Srila Prabhupada's purports. Faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. And what is that which is sublime? Sublime is that which is actually beyond the reach of our current senses, our current level of experimentation. You can't experiment with certain things. Like, for instance, when Marx wrote his theory of communism, there was no communism. But people believed that it was a good system. But you can't experiment with communism at that point because it didn't exist. So you place unflinching faith, unflinching trust. But the quality of what is sublime is what determines the faith of the person, and that depends on his desires. And ultimately, if a living entity, and the Bhagavad Gita brings us to this point that we are actually spirit souls, we're not this body. And as spirit souls, we are currently placing our faith in that which is material. As Srila Prabhupada, go back to the purport today. Srila Prabhupada says that a living entity goes to the demigods usually because he is mad to fulfill his lust. This happens when something undue is desired by the living entity and the Lord himself does not fulfill that desire. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that one who worships the Supreme Lord and at the same time desires material enjoyment is contradictory in his desires. That when one understands that one is spirit soul, until one understands one is a spirit soul, or one is spiritual in nature, or that one is actually eternal, there is no impetus or reason for anybody to desire anything other than that which is temporary. But when a person understands that that which is temporary cannot give him eternal happiness, cannot give him everlasting happiness, then to desire that which is temporary, knowing that one is eternal in nature, this desire is contradictory, as Srila Prabhupada writes here, to worshipping the Supreme Lord. Like, people many times don't analyze these kind of things. You say you want to praise God, but you don't know anything about God. You don't know anything other than that which is material, and what happens is your praise of God is only in relation to that which is to that of this world, which you yourself say is temporary. So who is God? Who is God, and what does he actually do? If you think about the grand scheme of things, God created this world, he created a bunch of human beings, and then there's the end times that will come, and then God will destroy everything, and whoever is there is going to go to heaven or hell. Okay, why did he do all this? What's the purpose of doing all these things? And what does God as a person, what does he actually want? Like, what does he want in life? His eternal life. There are no answers to these kind of things. And the Bhagavad Gita gives answers to these kind of things by explaining a science. And the science is that we are spiritual in nature. God is spiritual. And that there is a spiritual realm where there are spiritual activities. And the material activities of this world are simply a reflection, a dull reflection of that which actually exists in the spiritual world. And in the material world, we enjoy separately from God, or we drag God into our lives, but only as an aspect of our lives, not that God is the center of our lives. Why does God have to be the center of our lives? Why can't I be the center of my life? Well, because, first off, in the body that one has, your life is temporary. But the spirit soul is eternal. And the only logical way to understand this material world is by first accepting one very, very important point, that reincarnation is a fact. If you don't accept reincarnation, you can't make sense of anything. You can't make sense of God. You can't make sense of why anything was created. You can't make sense of why people were born poor or rich. I was watching a video, this Christian arguing with Keljumba, I thought I'd just watch a little bit of it to see what these people say, And, he starts saying, he said, first off, what's funny is that the Christians are arguing with whom they already have termed as a Hindu. And then they start quoting from the Bible. The point is, I don't have faith in your Bible. I don't accept your Bible. It's like, you can quote from the Bible, I'll quote from the Bhagavad Gita, we're going to go nowhere. It's the first, that's the first problem. It's like going to a person in China and quoting the First Amendment. Or going to a person in whatever, whichever country, and then reading the Constitution of the United States. Why are you reading that? It's like, this is said in the Bible. I'm just like, it's kind of funny because it's like, It's like, it's so funny, isn't it? And that's one of the ways in which you can talk to such people. It's like, hey, you know what? You quoting the Bible to me is like quoting the U.S. Constitution to someone who lives in China. It's like, you already said I'm a Hindu. You already have determined that I don't believe in in the Bible or Jesus. Why are you quoting that? You don't quote that. Let's talk logic. But there is no logic. There's no logic. For instance, I was watching his video, talking to a Christian, and okay, if you don't believe in Jesus, you don't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you go to hell. But even today, like he said, there are places in this world where people don't know anything about Jesus. Generations have been born. we're in 2024. That means 2024 years after Jesus died. And there are people who were born in parts of this world for 2024 years who had no idea of Jesus. Where are these people going? I don't know. Now, talking this, some Christian, again, if this is not offensive to Jesus, we're not offending Jesus. We're not saying Jesus is not a great, saintly person. But we are talking in terms of logic. This doesn't matter whether, it's like, the point is, how do you make sense of a God like this? How do you make sense of theology? This is what makes theology versus theistic science. Theistic science is when you understand, and actually atheism is not scientific, because atheism also needs to have faith. You need to have faith in thinking that everything came out of a big bang. You need to have faith. You can't prove it. You can't demonstrate it. You didn't see it. It's like that's the point. It is in that sense, because it's beyond the range of one's experiential capacity. It is, in that sense, it is sublime, but it's a low quality of what it's illusion. So when we discuss Bhagavad Gita, we understand it from the platform of knowledge that is received from Bhagavad Gita. But this knowledge is not that you just have to accept it. You just have to accept it, and if you don't accept it, you go to hell. No, there's a reason. Okay, you accept. Ultimately, yes, you have to accept it. But you have to accept it because of these reasons. And if you don't accept it, these are the consequences. You can choose what you want to do. But the pros and the cons of accepting the knowledge or rejecting it is not based upon blind faith. It's based upon a theistic science. It's based upon science. If you drink and drive, you're at a high risk of getting into an accident. Now, you could still drink and drive, but the consequences do not change because this is scientific. It doesn't matter whether you're a Hindu, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or whatever you are. If you drink and drive, your chances are high. You can say you believe in Jesus, you believe in God, you can praise the Lord as much as you want, and if you drink and drive, your chances of getting into an accident are high, period. Why? Because this is science. It's based upon the laws of material nature. So, Bhagavad Gita helps us understand the laws of material nature. It helps us understand God as a person, as a person who is praised to be the most intelligent, the most magnanimous, the most gracious, the most merciful, the best of everything. If he's the best of everything, how can his word sound sillier than a 5th grade science textbook? It can't be. That's the point here, and that's why we read that paragraph in the first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, that the Bhagavad Gita is a theistic science. And why is it theistic science? Because if one is fortunate enough to understand Bhagavad Gita in that line of disciplic succession without motivated interpretation, then he surpasses all studies of Vedic wisdom and all scriptures of the world. This is the standard of Bhagavad Gita. There's nothing like it. And it's not that there's nothing like it because we are reading the Bhagavad Gita, therefore there's nothing like it. No. We can discuss. And again, why should we discuss these things? Because through intelligence, one can transform one's desires. Otherwise, one tends to place faith in that which is fallible. We have to place faith in that which is infallible, in that which will never fail us. But if we place faith in that which is fallible, things go on for some time, but then when blank hits the fan, your philosophy doesn't seem to work. So then, what happens? People turn atheism or they change their faith. Okay, give an example. I think it was World War I. The Germans and the French are at war. Okay? The French are going to the church and the Germans are going to the church. And both are praying to God that they should win. Especially the women, because the men are at war. So the women are going to the church on both sides of the battle and praying to God that we want our husbands to come back home. Now what happens is the Germans win, and that's why World War I happens. They conquer all over, run all over France, And what happens is that's when actually the French en masse become atheists. Why? Because your philosophy is faulty. You may have had faith in God, and that's a good thing. But if your understanding of God is faulty, then what happens is, like I said, when something happens to something, then you lose your faith. Because you don't doubt your faith, you doubt God. You think, oh, God doesn't exist. It's not that my understanding of God might be wrong, my faith is faulty, but no, God doesn't exist because I'm perfect. How could I be wrong? I'm right. There was nothing wrong. But it's a silly. And therefore, that kind of faith can always be changing. And Prabhupada explains that. One can have a Christian faith and then one can become a Muslim. And then from a Muslim one can become a Hindu. But the Bhagavad Gita doesn't talk of that kind of faith. The Bhagavad Gita talks of faith that is intrinsic to the spirit soul. And that intrinsic faith of the spirit soul is called Sanatana Dharma. Which is eternal. It is an eternal characteristic of the soul because it is eternally related as part and parcel to the Supreme Lord Krishna. And therefore the constitutional position of the living entity is to understand Krishna and worship him. Ananya. Uninterruptedly. And then one's faith is placed in that which is infallible. Krishna is infallible. He's called Achyuta because he never fails. God doesn't fail. But when we understand God as he's presenting himself, and that's the beauty of Bhagavad Gita, as Prabhupada says, that it is the perfect theistic science because it is directly spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. This is not someone said something. This is Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead himself explaining this science. And we can analyze the Bhagavad Gita and you will find that there is nothing like this in the world. You can read it so many times. It's such an amazing book. And it's so relevant to us. Because we can't exist without faith. You can't run away from faith. You just transform your faith from one type to another. Therefore, it's very important for us to understand and develop right desires so our faith, and what is that desire? That desire is ultimately to become a devotee of Krishna. Why become a devotee of Krishna? Because ultimately we are all his part and parcels. Why are we his part and parcels? Because we are eternal and he's eternal and he's the source of everything. And that Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is not a tyrant. He's a wonderful person and you can understand his nature, quality and characteristics from the pages of Bhagavad Gita. And by worshipping him, by becoming his devotee, by rendering service to him, all our desires are actually fulfilled. And we become happy. And because it's a science, it works. Just like when one executes a science experiment, it works. You take baking soda and you pour vinegar in it, you'll have effervescence. We did in school, the volcano experiment. It works. Every time it works. Science. Similarly, Bhagavad Gita, you chant the holy names of Krishna, you will see a difference. It's undeniable. It's undeniable. Because these names are Krishna himself. Therefore, the chanting of the holy name of the Lord is recommended in this day and age. So, therefore, one who is a devotee of the Supreme Lord, he will take up to this devotional science, he will read the Bhagavad Gita and ask questions if one has doubts, but ultimately he surrenders unto the Supreme Lord. And through that surrender, he's liberated. He's liberated from all anxieties, all difficulties, and achieves an eternal life of joy and bliss. Not at the end of his life. He achieves that life, that joy and bliss. He can experience that in this lifetime, in this body. And this all springs from chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, thank you very much. Any questions, comments, protests? Yes.
Correction. The French won World War One.
Oh, that was the end.
Yeah, they lost. They were losing World War Two.
Oh, so there was World War II. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, yes.
You're mentioning that like at the end you do have to have faith in the Bhagavad Gita. Faith means you have to accept it. It's just, just one example is that like when you go to school, it's the same thing. Like you can study maths and you can choose not to accept that 2 + 2 is 4. But it's like, like you're saying, it's like an easier way of understanding consequences. You can reject maths in school, but like ultimately you have to accept it in order to like actually continue in life and actually to be successful.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It's like to understand the spiritual science is meant to get real success in life. And if you reject it, then people are living this philosophy. I gotta remember his name, but he says people live lives of quiet desperation, not knowing what is actually truth.
Yeah.
Then you just live in illusion.
Yeah.
You say you go to the store and you don't know how to do maths, you're gonna get cheated. So you go out into the society not knowing what the essence of life is, you're gonna get cheated.
Yeah.
And that's what the cheaters and the cheated in this modern world is.
Yeah.
Put faith in the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Prabhu, would you say that those who have faith in God are more influenced by the mode of goodness than those who have no faith in God or more atheistic in their conception of life?
Yeah, in general, as a general statement, you can make that, because it takes a little intelligence to accept, a controller, a creator, as a supreme, entity to whom one must abide by, because one is not the controller of this world. It takes a little bit to understand that. But again, you can only say that it's barely so, because one can be a theist and absolutely obnoxious in many ways way more obnoxious than an atheist. Still, the acceptance of some superior authority is better in the sense that there is a sense of like I said, there's a sense of being subordinate, versus an atheist who just thinks that there is no creator, there is no purpose. The theist has generally some purpose, but based on the nature of their purpose, it could be pretty obnoxious. But there's a purpose at least.
Seems like there's categories to, even within mode of goodness, like different people, and even within mode of goodness, there's like lower. I don't know how do you like.
Yeah, there is, but these people don't necessarily fall in the mode of goodness.
Yeah, but
It just means that they have a little more goodness. But again, just because they have a little more goodness doesn't necessarily make them, it doesn't necessarily make them better.
Yeah.
In a particular aspect, they're better. But in other aspects, they could be filled with passion and ignorance. And that could make it very bad, actually. So it depends on which aspect they are influenced by the mode of goodness.
Like within Vedic society, there could be like someone who, like, for instance, worships Vishnu as supreme, but maybe like more like a Shudra in their qualities, and then.
No, that's not what we're talking about.
No, but I'm asking, like, if someone has these kind of like low cost qualities, don't follow principles so strictly or whatever, and they have faith that Vishnu is supreme, then there's like.
No, then they're still better than, Shastra says they're still better than a Brahmana.
Yeah.
Who doesn't have faith in Vishnu. What is that? Satkarma Saddharma nipuno vipra mantra tantra visaradaihi avaishnava guru nasyat vaishnava swapacho guruhu. That even a dog eater can become a guru. Because if he's a Vaishnava, means he has faith, he is accepted Vishnu as Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Satkarma Nipuno Vipra, but a Vipra who's a Brahmana who is expert in performing so many Vedic rituals, Satkarma, pious rituals, Nipuno, expert. Mantra Tantra Visaradaihi, he is expert in chanting mantras, he is expert at performing tantras, different worship methods. Satkarma actually refers to executing good acts, and tantras refer to worship.
What verse is this from?
This is from the Vaishnava Yamala, I think. Prabhupada quotes it very often in his purports. Avaishnava guru nasyat. Okay, yes?
Microphone.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what you said, and I did have a question about.
Flick the switch on.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You agree with a lot of what I said?
I have a question about. You mentioned that Krishna is a wonderful person, like the best in the world, as far as explaining suffering, and not like first world suffering. It's like, oh my God, I crashed my car. Like as far as like just pure.
Real suffering. Hunger, famine, things like that.
How is that explained through him being like a good person?
Good question.
Yeah.
So, that's why reincarnation has to be understood as a fact, because that's where you understand karma. And this karma is a very complex thing. And karma means the result of our activities, good and bad. But we are eternal. So we are undergoing a particular kind of experience right now. Let's say an American experience. But we've had multiple experiences in the past, and because we are eternal, our experiences have been going on since time immemorial. And there's karma that's coming from all of that. And as karma is experienced, the previous karma gets destroyed. So when one experiences suffering, one is experiencing the result of bad activities that have been done in the past, sinful activities that have been done in the past. And when one is enjoying material comforts, benefits, and things like that, one is experiencing the benefit of good and pious activities that have been done in the past. And based upon that, people are grouped into collective karma also. For instance, when a hurricane comes and slams an entire city, all of the people in that city were destined to experience that particular kind of karma. But otherwise, there would have been people with completely varying wealth categories who would have been experiencing life in very different ways in the same city. Yet, when that hurricane strikes, a lot of their suffering is pretty much the same. Although, again, even there are some houses that survived and others that just didn't. This is how amazing the laws of material nature are that God has created, Krishna has created. Karma goes in such a way that eventually it lumps people in, and sometimes there is a collective effect, and sometimes there's individual. Sometimes individual. Gunshots are fired in a group of people, hits one person and kills him. Others escape. Other times there's a bomb that drops on the city, wipes out, several people at the same time. So this is the nature of karma. Now, how does it relieve God of the aspect is because we are experiencing the results of our own action, and God is only facilitating that through the laws of material nature. He doesn't want us to go through this, but we are going through this out of our own choice because we refuse to understand who He is and what is the actual purpose of our life. Rather, we are entangled in activities directed towards temporary sense gratification. And in the madness of temporary sense gratification, we fight with each other. We inflict suffering upon other living entities just because we think we are entitled to it. And we may even have a misconception about God that allows us to be like this, such as thinking that because God gave us dominion over animals, we can open slaughterhouses in mass and torture these animals beyond that which can be described in words. And you can say that you believe in God, and God is all merciful for allowing you to kill all these animals, but there is very terrible sinful reaction that awaits a person who participates in this kind of activity. So, therefore, Krishna has given us this knowledge, and He gives us this knowledge so that we have the tools to escape out of the cycle of karma. We don't have to be in the cycle of karma. We're not meant to be in the cycle of karma. But we have this cycle of karma because it facilitates the illusion that we are God. And until a person actually understands, after suffering a lot because of the cycle of karma, that actually I'm not a controller, I'm not God, and that I need to stop trying to just fulfill my desires at all costs. But I maybe need to start to understand what this is all about. I need to pause, I need to pray, I need to think. Like, what am I here? What am I here for? What is the purpose? Why does all this exist? Why is there so much suffering in this world? Then one reads the Bhagavad Gita and one can understand. And there in the Bhagavad Gita is the key to coming out of all of this. And the beauty is, this is not restricted to anyone. It is available to everybody. The Bhagavad Gita, it's not that only a certain class of people can practice, only a certain class of people can become liberated. Anybody who takes to this science and practices Krishna consciousness can be benefited, whether they be American, Indian, Japanese, whatever, man, woman, etc. Young, old?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, when you mentioned that there are people in parts of the world that have no idea about Jesus, there are also pizza. There are also people in parts of the world that have no idea about the
Bhagavad Gita, yes.
And is that also a part of the karma?
Yes, because ultimately the purpose of any religion is to love God. And so the purpose of Bhagavad Gita also is to develop love of God. And love is not forced. Love is voluntary. And out of a voluntary acceptance of desires, different living entities are placed in different parts of this world. Now, if one is sincere in his heart, and one actually prays with proper intention, one will be directed to a situation where one is actually relieved of these material miseries. But one has to be sincere in one's approach and desire, because God is present in everyone's heart. Krishna is present in everyone's heart. Now, which is why, as devotees, we go around explaining the Bhagavad Gita and teaching the Bhagavad Gita to different people. But yes, one is born in a particular situation because one desired to be in that situation. But by changing that desire, one can come out of the situation. This is the point. This is the point. This is very important to understand. But the desire can only be changed when you accept, you can only properly change that desire when you accept, the supreme authority as God. You may not even have full knowledge of him, but if the prayer is sincere, one will be directed to the right channel and the right place, and people are benefited.
Last one.
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned that we are spirit souls.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a certain number of souls, or is it one? Is it 100?
It's unlimited.
Okay. And we're
And
all
they're individual. We're not all one.
okay.
This is very important to understand. We're not all one. We are similar in nature. We are exactly similar in nature. And we are similar in nature to all other animals as well, and plants, and all other species of life. And we are individual, but we are finite in the sense we are small, and God, Krishna, is infinite, and we are his parts. So God is also of the same nature as we are, but Krishna, God, is infinite, whereas we are finite. We are minute spiritual sparks. And because he is infinite, and we are his parts, there are infinite sparks. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't have a form. It doesn't mean that he's just light or energy. He's also a person, just as we are.
Okay.
So this is theistic science. There's a lot more to this. But good questions. Thank you. Okay. Should end? You can keep it. Just keep it on the floor. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. We hope to see you all next Sunday. Hare Krishna.